Yeah, school's so stressful. I'm over it.
Okay, we are, oh, here comes Jess.
Housing, yes. Yes.
Hi, Jess, how are you?
Yeah, I picked my door.
Good. How are you? Sorry about that.
That's okay. We can hear you, and we're about to get started, so perfect timing. We are live on YouTube right now, and so we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll just welcome those who are listening in on YouTube. And that's so funny because I can hear myself on YouTube in the background, so let me turn off my sound there. Okay. So thank you for coming to the Youth Leadership Board. This was something we were planning on doing last year, was our career panel, and it got canceled because of COVID. So now we're doing it a little bit differently this year. So really appreciate our panelists today. So I'll do a round of introductions. I'll introduce our panelists, and then we'd love for the panelists to just give a brief background on who they are, what they do, and how they got to their current occupation. And then we'll follow up with some questions afterwards. So I'm just gonna go in the order that you are on my screen. So Cynthia Hand is an author, and that's about all I know about her. So I will let her introduce herself.
Okay, all right, that's good. Yes, I write books for a living. I write books for teenagers, young adults with HarperCollins. So I have 10 published novels, and I have 4 more in the works. So it's a full-time job for me. And I got started at it by first just being in love with books. I always loved books and reading, even when I was a small child, and I always wanted to tell stories. And I wrote constantly, even when I was a little kid. And in middle school, I wrote fan fiction with my friends. Like, what fan fiction is? It's where you pick someone else's story, like Star Wars or Wonder Woman, or you know, like a comic that you like or a movie that you like, and then you write your own story based on those characters. So that's what I did in middle school and high school. And then when I was in college, I was studying to be a lawyer because my parents thought that was a good idea, you know, and I liked it too. But about the middle of college, I decided to study writing instead, and I've kind of been on that track ever since. So I did a lot of school for writing and started writing for young adults and teenagers about 10 years ago. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for being here and for sharing your story. We'll move on to Anna.
Right. My name's Anna, and I'm a speech language pathologist, or otherwise known as a speech therapist. I work in both the school system and in the hospital system, which is kind of unusual for an SLP. Usually are one or the other. But my family and I, my husband and I and our kids moved to Baker City, Oregon, about a year and a half ago because of my husband's job, and they were in dire need of a speech pathologist in the hospital. So I started working there too. So I guess I got started. I always wanted to be a teacher because my mom's a teacher, she's retired. And then I went to school, to college, and I started talking to my aunt, who's a school psychologist. And she said, you know, if I could have gone back and if I could do it over again, I would go be a speech pathologist. So I looked into it and just job shadowed and was a therapy assistant for about a year in Chicago after undergrad, and then got into graduate school at Idaho State in Meridian. And for about 7 years, I worked at a clinic in Boise where we contracted with the schools, and I also worked with small children from about 1 to 18 was my age group. And now here in Baker City, I work at the elementary school My caseload is kindergarten through 6th grade. And then my at the hospital, I work with kids at the hospital too, just an outpatient. But more heavily, I work inpatient as needed. They call me if a patient has had a stroke, and we also not only work on speech, we work on swallowing function. So I help rehabilitate swallows for people who have lost that ability and lost their ability to speak. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And that one's more part-time. My main job is at the school. So yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I didn't know that you also work on swallowing functions. So thanks for sharing that. Kelsey, go ahead and introduce yourself. You know what, Kelsey, we can't, oh, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, my Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me know if it goes out again. My name's Kelsey. I am a licensed professional counselor and licensed associate marriage and family therapist. So I'm a therapist, and I'm also a doctoral candidate at Idaho State University. So I work currently in like a private practice where I see clients I see individuals, I see couples, and I do family therapy, and I help variety of different people with a variety of different mental health issues, and love doing that so much. I also, for my doc program, I'm receiving my PhD in counselor education, which means I'm learning how to educate counselors on how to become counselors. And so my education background is I did my undergrad at Boise State and got a couple of different undergraduate degrees in psychology and ethnic studies, and then pursued my master's of counseling at NNU, and now moving on to my doctorate. So I work as a clinician, and I'm also growing to learn how to become an educator of counselors receiving their master's degrees.
Great, thank you, Kelsey. We will go to Callie, and just so you know, I'm working on volume issues on my end, but I am listening. So go ahead, Callie.
Hi, I'm Callie. I know it says Kayleen Thomas. Callie is what I just go by. So I work for the Bureau of Land Management, mainly in riparian ecology. I have a background in plant and soil science. Went to school at West Virginia University. Got a graduate degree in plant and soil science, and then made my way out west. I've worked for the Nature Conservancy, the USGS, and now the BLM. I've always known I wanted to work in natural resources. I grew up in a family who spent a lot of time outdoors, and both of my parents worked in professions in which they were working outside all the time, and I would tag along when I could. Yeah, and I just wanted a job with schedule flexibility and being outside, working with the resources that I spend a lot of time recreating on. And it's pretty fulfilling, and I enjoy it.
Great, thanks, Callie, and good to see you. It's been a while. Last but certainly not least is Jessica Flynn.
Hi, I'm Jess Flynn. I guess I'd be called an accidental entrepreneur. I'm the CEO and founder of Red Sky, which is a public relations and marketing agency in downtown Boise. And we just celebrated 13 years in business. So we started up during the fun economic times of 2008. For those who may remember that, but for those who may not, it was just kind of challenging, just like the past year has been, but in a different way. But I say I'm an accidental entrepreneur because my career started out as a journalist. I was a television news producer. I went to school, the University of Texas, and got my bachelor's of journalism degree. I went into journalism because I love to write and know things and be the first to know things and tell other people about it. And I love storytelling. I thought I wanted to be on camera, and then I got really sweaty hands and my voice shook a lot. So I decided to be behind the scenes. Producers make a lot of the decisions, and I like to make decisions. So I worked in Austin, Texas, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, before I wound up back in Boise, where my family had moved. And I've been here since 2000. I continued in TV news until about 2004 and figured wow, I really like this place and I want to stay here and I don't want to keep moving for a job, because in the media world, you move markets or move between cities to kind of move up in your career. And when I decided I wanted to stick around Boise, it was, what else can I do with a communications background in journalism? And public relations was one of those options. So communicating with different publics, whether that's employees or colleagues or stakeholders or members of the community. So I worked for a little resort named Tamarack for a while. And when they started having trouble and my job disappeared, I became a business owner with a couple other people and started Red Sky. So I don't have a business degree, but have learned a lot of good lessons along the way. And I joke that I have my MBA in blood, sweat, tears, lots of tears, and have figured it out. And I've relied on a lot of good mentors and friends to help me along the way.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jess. So we have a wide variety of careers represented on the call, and that's because we had the girls choose a profession that they're interested in. So each one of you represents a profession that one of the girls would like to know more about. So these questions that we'll ask, I'm sure we'll have very varied answers, but I think that's the exciting part about having such a diverse group of women on this call. So I'll ask the first question and then I'll turn it over to the girls to ask some questions. So my question to you all is, what is your favorite thing about your job? And this can range from just the day-to-day stuff to more long-term components. So Kelsey, go ahead.
No.
We can't hear you.
No. How about now?
Now we can. Okay, now we can.
Like, this happens to my Zoom. Sometimes there's like a 15-second delay. Favorite part about my job, as a counselor, it's just, I mean, this is such a counselor answer, but just to be able to bear witness to people's struggles and what they're experiencing in life. It's such a beautiful opportunity to meet like so many different people in different stages of their life and sit with them in some of their most painful moments, to support them and encourage them and be alongside them as they experience their healing. I experienced this as well as a counselor educator, like doing my doctoral program and teaching counselors how to sit with their clients. So it's a pretty meta experience, but I truly love my job. I couldn't imagine doing anything else, but to be able to meet, bear witness to this very sacred part of someone's life is such an honor.
Thanks for that, Kelsey. Cynthia, would you like to share?
Sure. I really, there are two favorite things. One of them is just being able to like retreat into a different world for a while. And there have been different times in my life where writing has been kind of my escape hatch and my safe place. And it's just, like being able to inhabit a cool and interesting world in my mind. So I really love that part of it. And as far as being an author goes, what I love about being an author is being able to share that world and the characters and the people with readers, with other people. It's like we know the same group of people really well, and there's a kind of kinship and connection that happens that way that I just really love. So I love getting to know the people in this imaginary world, and I love other people getting to know those people too, and it's like we have the same group of friends.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm jealous of that. That's great. Callie, would you like to share?
So as I alluded to earlier, I really enjoy working outdoors and being outside. I've always been really into plants, and I'm a botanist, so I spend a lot of time looking at plants. So I would say my favorite part of the job is getting to just be outside, working with plants, looking at beautiful flowers all the time. Well, only in the spring. And I have a lot of diversity in my position. I get to work on a lot of different projects. A lot of it is kind of more boring policy stuff, but then there is this more fun side where I get to go help with river patrols, and I get to go down the river, and I help USGS do stream flow measurements, anything riparian related, riparian being the interface between the aquatic system and upland range. So yeah, I like the diversity and just getting to be outside, and I work with a lot of like-minded people. It takes a very specific kind of person to be in that job. So I tend to work with people I get along with really well.
That's a really important part of any career is coworkers. Jess, what's your favorite thing about being an entrepreneur and running your own business?
I think fancy word for it would be ideation, but brainstorming. The company that we started is what's called a generalist agency. So that means we work with everybody from a startup tech company to somebody promoting tourism in a specific region, to a company that's in the middle of like a really bad crisis. Maybe they had a problem with one of their products. And so it's a lot of problem solving and brainstorming and throwing ideas at the wall. And I really thrive off of, I guess, the chaos of that. Like, let's put everything out there and try and come up with different ways to talk about something, different ways to approach it. I'm kind of known as the person with the synapses of fury in the office, that my mind bings in different directions. And so that can be a strength when you're trying to approach problems in different ways. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I would say in some fashion that also helps there, because there's so many different ways to solve business problems and also to, I guess, reimagine what a business can be and how it can operate, and to be able to put my own stamp on that and bring some different thoughts on leadership and running a business to the table has been really, it's been more rewarding than I would have thought 13 years ago when I was completely freaked out by the prospect of it.
Being a new leader at my position, I definitely understand that feeling. Anna, would you like to share what your favorite thing is about your job?
Sure. Yeah, I guess what's really cool about my job is I get to kind of witness the rehabilitation and development from birth to death, really, and kind of the wide variety that comes with that. And, you know, the first words to the last words of someone. And it's kind of, as I've transitioned a little bit more to the hospital, getting to see that side of it, watching a current patient I had was moved to hospice, and helping create a diet plan for her that's safe for her to eat, but also gives her quality of life so she can enjoy food in her last days. And then also just working with kids as develop their language, their articulation, their speech. And at the school system, I've really found a love for developing literacy skills in kids and reading, and you know, I'm in a very low socioeconomic area, and really building that foundational skill of reading and my role in that and how that helps them in their quality of life. And if, above anything, I just want them to be able to read, because I think that's going to be the most important thing for them in life. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of what I like about it.
Great, thanks for sharing. That's really interesting. So do any of you guys have questions that are in the room? Please unmute yourself and ask your question. And introduce yourself too.
Okay, I have a question. Okay, I hear myself talking. This is interesting. Sorry. Okay, I'm Ava. Hi. I'm kind of starting to enter the work field, and I learned like careers are very different once you start doing them. Like, what did you not expect about your job? Now that you're in it, it's kind of normal, but like when you started it, what surprised you?
You can go ahead and hop in, or I can continue to call on people.
I'll jump in and kick it off. I would say what surprised me, and that I don't know how besides doing it you would learn it, is the importance of being able to both communicate with those you work with and understand that everybody has different ways in which they work and ways in which they process information, and how you're going to constantly be having to adapt to that so that you can collaborate, work together. So much of, I think, having a business or any kind of business is recognizing that everyone has different ideas of success and different things that motivate them or different things that matter to them. And being able to both communicate your values and how you want to operate something, but also listen to and respect what they're looking for in their job and career, or even how they need instructions, is so important. I think when I first started out, I didn't pay as much attention to that or give as much time to that. And my life would have been a lot easier if I had figured it out earlier on. But I'm in the communication world, so you would think that was part of it, but just how to motivate and support people as they grow in what they do, and also figure out teamwork and how to talk with folks was so key.
I'll kind of bounce off of that too. I think it is, you don't realize how much you are working with other people and other professions, and how to get along with others and recognize that. And it's not just being nice, it's recognizing other ideas when we're working on a plan for a child, or a plan of care for a patient in the hospital too. There's all these different disciplines coming at it from different angles, and being able to come together and figure out what's best for that individual. And there can be conflict that comes with that, but you'll be a lot more successful if you can kind of learn to collaborate and take all those different ideas.
I can dovetail off of that also. I think I was surprised in becoming a professional author by how much time and work that you spend working with other people in, the publishing industry, and just then the people all around that. And writing is a really solitary activity, but it feels like I didn't know before just how many people you're interacting with all the time, and you really need to use those people skills there too.
I think for myself, becoming a counselor, I thought when I went to grad school, I'd learn all these techniques and theories, and that would be it, and how I could help people. And I didn't realize how much I needed to work on myself. And so I know this is maybe more unique to my profession, but how important it was for me to go to therapy, work out my own stuff, because the philosophy in our profession is who you are as a person is who you are as a counselor. And so how important it is to do that introspection, do that internal work so that you can support others in doing their internal work.
Well, this is kind of completely different than maybe what everyone else said, but I would say the thing that surprised me the most about the profession I'm in currently, and it always wanted to be in, was just how challenging it was to get into and break into. You have to be very persistent, and it's a much more competitive field than I had expected when I finished grad school. A lot of people that I went to school with and started out in this job with have gone on to do other things because it was just too competitive. But you just have to stick with it. And sometimes when it doesn't feel like it's going to work out, suddenly it does.
That's a good trait for any field, right? Persistence. Keep going. Another question from the masked audience.
Okay, my question is for Kelsey. I wanted to ask, obviously, like, you deal with a lot of heavy stuff day to day. So how do you make sure you separate that personal life? And like you said, you did a lot of personal work. So like, what skills did you get being able to help people and also help yourself stay fulfilled in your job?
Such a great question. And because that's oftentimes like, oh, like how do you do all this like emotional labor all the time, right? And then still maintain your own humanity in your own life. One thing that helped beyond like I guess my own work that I've done and I continue to do in my graduate program, and I think all good therapy graduate programs, is emphasizing self-care. Self-care is such a term that's thrown around now. Like we think of like taking a bath, right? Or doing these things, but truly identifying what are things that bring meaning to your life that is separate from interacting with others. And so for me, mine's pretty like basic, I guess, in terms of like exercise, being involved in community, like the Basque community in Boise. But being very consistent with that has been a big part of maintaining my like own life from my clients' lives and not thinking about them on the weekends, because it's so tempting, right? When my profession, the existence of it is in relationship with others. It's hard to let that go because I care about my clients. So consistently integrating my own self-care into my life has been important, as well as rituals. And so when I say rituals, I mean when I'm done like seeing 6 clients at the end of the day, I wash my hands with cold water for at least 20 seconds to just remind myself and my body that, okay, I'm leaving this here, I'm done with my day, and I'm gonna go home like to my cat and or my family and my friends and exist separately. Because that's what can lead to burnout, is doing all of this emotional labor, being so intertwined into your clients' lives. It can feel very natural to be thinking about them, but reminding myself that I am my own person with my own journey, and I serve and support these people, but that only exists Monday through Friday.
Those are great techniques, Kelsey. Oh, sorry. Okay. I was just going to maybe open that up to the larger group to answer, how do you balance work and life? You're also successful in your own careers. And so I'm sure there's been times where you've had a lot of work on your plate. So what are some of your go-to work-life balance strategies?
Kelsey, those were just fabulous. I feel like I'm going to take some of those tips for myself. That was a great answer. Man, I want to hang out with you. So I would say a lot of times too, I spend a lot of time with children, and I have my own children. So sometimes it's about coming home, working with some tough situations with kids, and then coming home to my own. So separating that sometimes is hard, but recognizing, I guess when it's your own kids, it's a lot different. But I do, I guess, try and, like Kelsey said, find my own path and my own thing, self-care. Sometimes it's hard though. Right now, taking on this second job, I've found that I do need to recognize that. And I think recognizing that you do need to leave things at work, it can be hard. And it is something is going to be important in any career, I think, especially when you're working with other people so deeply like that. It can be hard. So something I definitely need to work on.
It can be challenging for me to separate my work from life. I spend a lot of time recreating in the resource that I manage. So sometimes when I'm out there, I'm like, oh, there's this issue that needs to be addressed. And it is kind of hard for me to turn that part of my brain off, or like, how can we recreate in this wild and scenic canyon without, destroying a certain plant population, or, trying to get people to stop leaving trash everywhere. So it can be really challenging. But as far as work life, I just really take time. I take time off. Take time off, and I realize that that's important for me in order to get my job done. And even when it feels like might be skipping out on someone or a project because I want to take a 3-day weekend, I know it's not the end of the world if I do that, and the project will just go forward. And on Monday, I'll start working again. It's not the end of the world. I think it's important to remember that, nothing is that pressing that you can't just take time that you need to step away from work.
I can jump in. I really have a hard time keeping my work and my home life separate right now because my kids are home, and usually I have time set aside for both of those things. And so that's hard right now, but in normal life circumstances with this job, I think it's just about being flexible with my own schedule and being flexible with the needs of my work and the kids and all of the other responsibilities, and then just giving myself some grace about it. I like to joke that I always have 10 balls in the air, and then there's always 2 or 3 on the floor, like, and I just have to live with that and just keep going and see what works. But writing is one of those things that's kind of hard to compartmentalize and leave that part of myself off, and go on and do this other thing because it's always going on in my mind. So I just learned to accept that and just kind of go with it.
I waited to last because I think I'm last because I am such a work in progress on this one. I feel like no matter what job I had, I've always been job first, personal life second. Like I've always associated my self-worth, to be honest, with what job I am doing. So I've constantly been working on that. And I would also say the life of an entrepreneur and business owner is that you're responsible for more than just yourself. And particularly in this past year, it was very hard to separate because it was 10 other people's livelihoods and their families' livelihoods that were kind of trying to figure out our way forward as the economy went off the cliff. So I really work on trying to find other things of joy and creativity, because even though creativity is what brought me into the work I'm doing, so much of the day-to-day work that I do is not hands-on creativity. I don't consider typing on a computer the physical creativity of making paintings or angry cross stitching that I've been doing or something physical. So I need kind of that reconnection to something physical. I try to read poetry and fiction and get out of the news and doom scrolling that I have to do for my job. And I can't remember who just talked about grace, giving myself grace. I think if anything, this past year has shown that I try to embrace the downtimes whenever they come. So it's not, I must be frantic from 8 to 5 and I can only try to have downtime then, because I've tried to move away from feeling I must always be on and everything is an emergency. When I looked back on lessons I've learned kind of the first decade of business ownership, one of the ones that I think applies here is just because it's not how I would do it doesn't mean it's wrong. So there are other people in my organization who are just as effective as managing the business when I'm not there or doing the client work. And I have to give up a little bit of the ego and control in order to maintain balance. So constant work in progress.
I'm right there with you, Jessica. Do any of you guys have another question to ask? Or I can throw one out. Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, so my name's Emily. So my question is, how do you express your individuality and create your own workspace in your work environment?
Could you all hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, should I randomly assign? Callie, go ahead.
I'm not sure that I can really answer that. I feel like I feel like me just doing this job is really expressing who I am. So just being in this position, having this position feels like I'm, this is how I'm an individual. Yeah, I spend so much time outside and alone that it doesn't really necessarily feel like I'm expressing anything to anyone, but just having this job feels like I'm expressing my individuality.
My job is similar in that I do most of it alone, but But I will say that I've learned to embrace my individuality in how I think about writing, in terms of sometimes you get into this state where you think, oh, every story has already been told, everything has already been done. And I think that's the time where you kind of embrace who you are, and understand that you as a person have this unique fingerprint of experience and creativity and imagination, and that anything that you make is going to be different than what someone else makes, and it's going to be new in that way. So I think that's the only way I can answer the question in terms of individuality, and I've learned to embrace that, like embrace, you know, my own individuality and how that creates unique stories.
I'll jump in next on this one. By the very nature of the type of business that I own, and to get business, I have to be out front and out talking and networking and doing things. And a lot of times, some of those settings have a lot of men in dark suits, you know, kind of looking the exact same way. And I have, you can't tell, but I'm 5'2", so I'm not very tall. I have a pretty loud voice, but I've taken to having my own kind of style of dress and bright colors, and almost trying to stand out a little and look different and show my personality through my personal style. I also do a lot of speaking and training, and I'm not very polished and formal as a speaker, and I kind of lean into that's my authentic way to do it. And I'm not going to be this very tied down type of individual for trainings, because I don't think that's as approachable. So I've really, instead of apologizing for that, I've really leaned into it. And, you know, I'm not going to be that type of business leader for everyone that is invited to a certain table, but I'm going to stand in my truth that way. I also have, I think I built a lot of connections in the early years, and continues on Twitter. And so the type of opinions and thoughts and things that I do choose to have a voice about, you can learn about me that way. So for those that haven't met me in person. And then the last thing I would say is I love art. I sit on the Arts and History Commission for the city. I'd like to say I'm an arts patron, but I don't have that much money. So I collect local artists as much as I can. And so in my office, it's not what you would think is a typical CEO office, because I have lots of different art and things up on the walls, because I need that visual inspiration for what I do. So.
I think for me, I might have mentioned this earlier, but I try to be as much as myself as I can within my relationships with my clients. It's a philosophy in counseling of who you are as a person is who you are as a counselor, because you wouldn't want to see a counselor who's just this wall, right? Who just reflects things. You want to know you're connecting to the humanness of someone else. So I really try to have my personality shine through with like my warmth, or talking about kayaking, or whatever, you know, is appropriate in that context. Decorating my office, I think a lot of counselors feel this way, is really important as far as like self-expression. So although I don't own the private practice I work at, so I can't like paint the walls, but I can hang the macrame that I like on the walls, or have these little elements that are kind of my personality shining through, that lets my clients know that I'm human and I'm showing up as a human, and not just as this like professional with rigid like boundaries on my personality.
I guess I can go to, I guess, like others have said, my job, the essence of my job, it's hard to kind of, I guess, express a lot of my individuality, but doing my job is in itself kind of me, my personality. A lot of being a speech pathologist is picking up on detail, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and have always been very driven person, just always kind of wanted to be the best in things. And I've been able to do that by just, I enjoy professional development and learning more about there's so much to learn with speech pathology, so much I still am learning about. And I get to do that every day in my job. And sometimes I need to rein it in a little bit, because I'm like, I can't learn about 7 different things right now. I need to pick one thing, but just that drive, and it just really gives me a lot of a purpose and happiness when I do my best in my job.
Thanks. When that question was asked, I was like, oh, how would I answer that? And you guys just brought forth some really great answers. And I'm so glad this is being recorded, because this is such a rich discussion with great nuggets of information. So thank you. Another question from the masked audience, or I can ask a question. Anybody? Okay.
I would say, like, what would you say to your 18-year-old self, like, almost like embarking on this like new chapter? I guess I'm like a senior in high school, so I'm like really thinking about college and where I want to go to be fully fulfilled. So if you guys would be able to give yourself any advice, what would it be?
I think, if I had overall advice to give my 18-year-old self, I think I would say to be more present. When I was about that age, I kind of let myself float through decisions and I didn't give a lot of strategy to any of it. And I don't think you have to strategize your whole life out ahead of you. I do think you do need to like be flexible and kind of go where the current takes you to a point. But I think that I wish that I had been more sort of thoughtful about things and present with them in terms of my life, but also in terms of how I approached my career and the different paths that I chose to get there. So.
I guess I would, I loved that time of my life. So it's hard to like look back and think that of like any regret or anything to say to myself. I guess just remember to enjoy it. Being 18 and just the whole world in front of you and all these options is just, it can be scary, but it is also just such a cool time in your life. And I'm so excited for you, Grace, and your next chapter. You've got just the whole world in front of you. All of you guys do, and to explore different options. Since we're talking about careers specifically, job shadow and ask questions, do things like this, and ask people things, and that'll just really help guide you in what you think will be your profession and what you want to do in life. And I also would say, I wish I would have traveled more. I wish I would have studied abroad, and I didn't. I never did. And that is one of my biggest regrets. But I did move away, where Grace's brother is right now in Minnesota. And it was the best decision of my life, just going and getting away and becoming myself away from my family, and really figuring out who I was away from who I was as a kid. So yeah.
Anna,
I'd agree with Anna. I wish I had, I tried my best to participate in as many opportunities that I could for learning about what I might want to do professionally. There were a lot of opportunities that I turned down that I look back on, and I think it probably would have helped me out, figure out where I wanted to be sooner. So definitely just saying yes to any opportunity you have that might shed some light on what, you might want to do when you're older. Moving away, I think, is really important also. It's really important to get away from the worldviews, that were kind of imposed on you by your family, and just the community that you grew up in. And I think it's really good to get out there and meet as many different people. It can really open up your mind and give you a broader perspective and empathy. I think it's super important to move away. I wish I'd worn sunscreen That is a big one, and unrelated to most people's jobs, but seriously related to mine, because I spend a lot of time outdoors. And I have to say, I wish I could go back and shake my 18-year-old self. But I would agree with Anna. It's important just to get out of your comfort zone. I think that's huge when you're that age.
I totally agree with Callie and Anna, what they shared of leaning into the discomfort of moving away. I moved out of state to Idaho, and one of the best decisions I could have made. It was so scary and truly rewarding. And I think leaning into just the experiences of the unknown, of like being okay with the ambiguity of not knowing what your career is, but knowing that the things that you do along the way will just enrich that. Like, even if I didn't get that specific degree at that specific university, I would still have landed in this role probably because I knew I wanted to be a counselor. So just being okay with not having it figured out. And then further, I think Anna mentioned this too, of traveling. Like, I studied abroad, but it was only a month, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't spend a whole year in the Basque Country. So just challenging yourself, leaning in, and knowing that even if it doesn't fit in this journey that you have laid out in front of you right now, it's just going to enrich your life, and it will all work out.
There's an author that I read, Anne Helene Peterson, and she has this newsletter, and every week she asks like this question. One of the recent ones was, what was your educational regret? And I like jumped in immediately, and I'm like, that I tried to rush through college so quickly and graduated early and started working while I was still in college full time. So, and yes, there were financial reasons I wanted to get through quickly, but if I had just taken that one last semester to either travel abroad or maybe look at just other things that were of interest, like be open to serendipity. I started saying, I'm going to be a journalist, I'm going to get a job. And it was everything that was this checklist of do these amount of internships, which were great, but they were all in that same field. And then I look at some of my colleagues and people I've interacted with that kind of maybe had a history minor or psychology or sociology, and their perspectives and what they learned along the way has added to the richness of how they understand what we do in communication. And I was like, oh, if you had only, tried some of these things, or taken that moment to breathe instead of just jumping right into the workforce. So I do, even if it's not being able to travel abroad to some amazing, country for a full year, just getting some of that experience. I, as an adult, got to do in a Rotary adult exchange down to Argentina for 6 weeks. And it was the most fulfilling thing. If you want to talk about empathy and trying to have a better understanding of other people's, just go anywhere that is not your hometown. And so, yeah, looping into what everyone's already said there.
Did we hear from everybody? I'm just so enthralled by all your answers, I've lost track. We have a little bit more time left, so I had one sort of larger question to ask, and you can answer this how you feel fits with what you do or want to express in our remaining minutes. But so Wild Hearts Idaho is focused on getting girls and young women into the outdoors. So we're very female focused, we're outdoor focused. And then the Youth Leadership Board has been working over the last year to build leadership skills. And so my question to the panelists is, how does being a woman, the outdoors, or leadership play into your careers or lives? And what advice do you have for our members?
What were the 3 things again? Outdoors, leadership, and
being a woman in your field.
Oh, being a woman in my field.
I would go ahead.
No, go ahead. Okay, I'll go. That's okay. Zoom is always so awkward sometimes. Who goes first? So I'm not really in the outdoors much. I guess I do. I live in Baker City now, and there is a lot to do outdoors here. So I kind of use that as my self-care, and with my family, we go hiking and skiing and stuff. So that's not really related to my career, but I guess in terms of leadership, what's kind of cool about my job is typically you're the specialist wherever you are. So you kind of have this sense of I'm the only one that knows about this in the building and in this situation, and having that that knowledge is kind of powerful, and I love it. I love being the person that the doctors turn to and ask to me, or the principal, or the teachers, or the parents. You know, how can I support this kid with my child with their language development? That in itself is a leadership in a way, because you have to share your knowledge. And there's always opportunities for growth too, I think, in most jobs too, you know. And I'm the lead speech pathologist in our school district. So I get to come up with professional development ideas, work with girls on managing caseloads and their paperwork and whatnot. So I really enjoy that part of my job. And then I guess it was one of them about being a female in our career. Yeah, my career is 95% female. So and the school is very heavily female. So I guess it just kind of comes with the territory. But either way, you know, I've got male doctors coming to me and asking for my advice, and female doctors. So, and my principal who's male, and, you know, Anna, what do you think we should do with this student? So yeah, that's pretty cool.
So my job is primarily, you know, outdoors, because I'm doing, you know, plant surveys, stream surveys. I mean, my job is advocating for the outdoors and managing public lands for multi-use, whether it's grazing or recreating. So I'm outside all the time. My job is the outdoors, and I really love it. For a lot of reasons. You know, I just have flexibility in my schedule, and it's just really rewarding to know that I'm, you know, doing a little thing for this planet that we all get to live on. As far as being a woman, it's really interesting. You know, I think when I was in grad school, everyone would talk about how it's just such a male-dominated field, but ever since I moved out I started in Oregon and then Idaho, and kind of been bouncing back between the two places. And every office I've worked in it's mostly women. I almost always am working directly with women. And that I think that was really not the case back in the day, but I guess I don't know what has changed or why. Maybe, I don't know. To me, it seems like everyone I work with are women, and it's great. As far as leadership goes, I get to, you know, I have to advocate for the resource. If I see a problem, if I see an area being impacted because of a certain use, then, you know, I have to speak up, and I have to lead my colleagues to want to change something to improve the condition of this resource. And also, I am often kind of leading a crew of seasonals to get the field work done for the season. And that's really fun, because they're, you know, usually they're usually just getting into the field, and they always have a lot of questions about it. And it's nice to be able to help them out and then advocate for them later on, to help them kind of get their foot in the door and get move on their career.
I'll jump in, and it was interesting when I started Red Sky. There were no other real PR creative agencies that were owned and run by women. And now in Boise, there's at least 7. And so when I think about business ownership and leadership, I used to kind of push back up that label of female CEO because I'm like, well, can I just be a good CEO? But I've come to recognize that we don't have enough women owning and running and scaling and growing businesses. I sit on a National Women's Business Council, and the number that always strikes me is that there's like 13 million small businesses that are owned by women, which is a great number. That's close to half of what qualifies as small businesses in the US. But 90% of those are what we call solopreneurs. So businesses that it's just the one person, which is fine, but the economic impact of having a couple employees and growing that would show so much more women in leadership and women running businesses. And I'm biased in thinking that women have amazing leadership skills in the way that they can approach business. So I think now that part of my charge is to be vocal and visible as a small business owner so that I can help show and hopefully inspire more people to start businesses or take over leadership of them.
I can jump in. As far as the outdoors goes, I spend all of my time working indoors, but I really use the outdoors as a way to refill my creative well. So like if I'm feeling stuck or blocked or just tired emotionally or intellectually, I go to the outdoors to just sort of let that refill. So that's a big part of my job in that small way. In terms of leadership, I write some books, a series of books called the Lady Janie's books with two other authors, and they are, and I am sort of considered the leader out of the three of us in that it was my idea to start with. And what I've really learned about leadership through that is just the value of listening, right? Like, and really getting the opinions and thoughts and collaboration of everybody. And I've never been a great listener. So that's been challenging for me, and something that I've learned is just key to making the team work, is just learning to be a good listener, not just to like smile and nod and, you know, get through it, but like to really, really deeply listen to what other people are saying and their ideas, and think about that. And then in terms of being female, I think when I was in school, like in grad school for being a writer, all of the other people in my program, except for one, were boys. They were all men. And there was certainly at that time in sort of the literary writing field, a sense that, that if you wanted to be praised as a writer, you needed to write like a man. And I always sort of pushed against that. I hated that idea. And I always felt like I had something to prove about it. And now in young adult writing, most of the people involved, most of the writers and almost all of the publishing world in young adult it's all run by women. They still tend to give more benefits and higher pay and, you know, like all of those things to male writers, which just, I cannot, you know, it just grates my teeth. But what I've learned about that too is that I have a responsibility as a writer to write strong women, and not strong women as they're painted by men, you know, like they dress like men and they can kick butt and they can do all of these things like men, but like that are actually strong women who are like women, you know, who can like anything that they want, and they don't have to be violent to be considered strong. And I think that was something that was being talked a lot about when I first started writing, and something that I really feel passionately about writing now. So just to show, you know, readers that women can be strong without having sort of male traits, right?
I think I'll wrap us up in this topic, but when I think of the outdoors, there's a really neat type of counseling called like adventure-based therapy, which is under like an eco-wellness lens. And I don't practice it, but one of my close colleagues does. And it's so cool because there's so much healing that can happen through the outdoors, such as forest bathing. That's like one example, which is really cool. And I recommend you look into it if you're into that. And so there's such a connection between healing and engaging with nature and the outdoors and the immensity that is the world beyond our own internal self. When I think of being a woman and being a leader in the field, so many counselors are women. However, that's not reflected in leadership and counseling. I used to work at Boise State and I was a counselor there seeing college students, and folks that were in charge were men. And I recall, like, I loved working there. And I also recall feeling so intimidated by the psychiatrists on staff that were oftentimes men. And it really took a lot of reflection to remind myself the confidence in my abilities, in my education, and what I can offer. And if I had a professional disagreement, voicing that and being confident in that was something I had to constantly remind myself of, because I find myself, even in other leadership positions I have, like nationally, I'll feel intimidated and think like, well, who am I, right? Who am I to like say these things? And I have a moment of that, and then like following that is a reminder of how much I have to offer, how much my education that I've integrated into my life speaks for itself. And that although this feels like there's this discrepancy and maybe some internalized misogyny that I have, how important it is to recognize my worth and what I have to offer. I also see leadership as a woman as an opportunity to not only uplift other women, but women of color, non-binary folks, trans folks, and also serving as like recognizing that and helping uplift others who experience marginalization in their life. Seeing that opportunity builds community to uplift each other.
Wow, I'm just blown away by you guys. I feel really humbled to be in your presence on this discussion. It's just really rich ideas coming through. We have a few more minutes, so I just wanted to ask the panelists if there's anything else you wanted to share with the group, or pieces of advice or wisdom, resources, anything you'd like to share.
If there's anything about what got you through school.
What was that?
If things like helped get you through school, like just that long journey and like seeing, I guess, the light at the end of the tunnel.
High school or college? Or both?
Like college and masters and like all of the programs in general, just leading up to your career.
I would just live in the moment a little bit and don't stress so much about getting through as much as you know, taking it in, because it is such a good time in your life, both at the end of your senior year and into college. Like I said before, it was like my husband hates when I say this, but the best time of my life was college. Not like I was like a huge party girl or something. I mean, it was just such a wonderful time to like grow and learn and develop relationships and friendships and figure out who I was, that I was, you know, no rush to get through it. I mean, I did in a timely manner. But you know, I would, don't rush through it, you know, take it day by day, and relish in the moment, I guess. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I didn't hear that question. I assume it was something related to what advice for being in school.
Yeah, getting through school, like, yeah, any advice on sticking with school? Is that? Yeah.
I would say find your people that aren't just those that you run into in a classroom, or that may be in the dorm, or that live next to you, say you're at home. And my experience here was the richest, most interesting experiences I had was working for the student television station, and the meeting and working with folks that were trying to make films, and just this really interesting group of people that it wasn't I was trying to get a certain grade. I wasn't delivering a paper. It was just people that were super passionate about their creative craft. And if I was staying up late and doing things on the weekend, it was helping somebody make a stop animation film or something that was really interesting. And we were nerds in our own way of being into like videography and film and all of that stuff. And it was like the joy of learning and doing something versus just the pass the test version of doing something. So whatever it is that ignites that feeling in you, find that group of people that it also does. And with colleges, and I would imagine high schools as well, there are those, what do they call them? Extracurricular activities. But that to me kind of really put the flesh on the bones of my education to meet those people.
My advice is a little bit similar to that. And then I would just say value the knowledge as well as the result. Like sometimes I think when you're in college or in high school too, you're just looking toward the end result of what that's going to give you. And so again, you're thinking about passing the test and just getting through. But to really value the learning that you do for the sake of learning it, just how much that enriches your life and how it's going to change you as a person, and just take responsibility for the learning itself, and value that for its own sake. And I think that always makes it nicer to go through, right? Because you're not just looking at the finish line.
I would agree. I think I hit the books a little too hard in college. And it wasn't until after I finished my undergrad that I felt like I had time for myself again. And I kind of wish I had I wish I hadn't been just like looking for that next internship or, looking for that next thing that I thought was going to advance my chances of, getting a good job when I was finished. And I feel like I missed out on the opportunities just to like go travel. I mean, we were talking earlier about studying abroad. That just never was going to fit into my program that I had in my mind, because this is the timeline that I had to do it in, that it was no timeline other than my own, like there was no need for me to put such high standards on myself that early on in life. I think you don't recognize how young you are and how much time you have when you're, in college. Now, I'm in my 30s and I'm like, I still have this giant life to live. I think that's important to know that you're young and you have a lot to experience and do it. And then when I was in grad school, I feel like, I kind of had a good time between being an undergrad and going to grad school. But then in grad school, my first year, I was doing the same thing and burning myself out really bad. And I had to tell myself, like, it's important to get through your studies. It's important to have those internships, but it's also really important to just do things for yourself, to just experience new things. I think that's really important.
I think I'm kind of echoing what was shared already, but like leaning into your interests, even if it doesn't feel like it aligns with your path. So like take those classes in anthropology, even if you want to be an engineer, take advantage of that. And because I just so believe that it will inherently weave into your path anyway, even if it doesn't seem that way in the moment. You don't have to have a reason or see it as an investment in something that has to do with your career. If you find yourself liking it, just lean into that and explore that, because inevitably you'll just continue to develop as a person, which is an investment in yourself. And I wish I did that a little bit more when I was in college and even my master's. And as I say this now in my PhD program, I'm like, oh, I should probably do that some more, because there's so much time that you don't have to have it all figured out, and just reminding yourself of that if you're feeling in a place in whether you're finishing high school or college of, I need to have this figured out, I need to have a plan, trying to remind yourself that just day by day, it will all work out, your plan will happen, and not to put too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, when I think back at college, I don't really remember my classroom time. I remember learning the most outside of the classroom. So just day-to-day interactions or the adventures you go on, things like that. So yeah, I would echo everything you guys are saying. Is similar to my college experience and what I would change if I went back. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. I'm going to stop the live stream right now, but